Hi, it's Dana, and I'm here with your divination for the new moon in sidereal Pisces. The 2026 sidereal astrology guide says, planting seeds of self trust.
Break down. If you can't hold it, let it hold you. Let it carry you. When you've done all that you know to do.
I'm back. Did you miss me? Y'all, between eclipse season and Mercury retrograde, your girl got. And so I have no internet. It was just a whole snafu. And I thought I was going to be able to record the podcast for the full moon lunar eclipse in sidereal Leo, but I couldn't. Life conspired to make otherwise happen. And it worked out because I needed to sit myself down and do a little nothing. Oh, thanks, Chris. But if you're not following me on Instagram, what are you doing with your life? Because I did go live and I did offer a word and it was really good. So you should go follow me at People's Oracle and you should be looking for that live. And also, I post great content. So why wouldn't you want to participate in my Instagram shenanigans? Planting seeds of self trust. So we are in something I like to very affectionately call mutable madness. And mutable madness is when the mutable signs are occupied. That is sidereal, Virgo, Pisces, Gemini, and Sagittarius. And at this new moon, it is sidereal, Gemini, and Pisces in the hot seat. And this is quite an uncomfortable configuration. I want to share something with you that I've shared with clients before. And it's a term I use to describe mutable signs and the catalyst experience of mutable signs. Remember, in Div for Lib, signs are experiences. So if you have a sign occupied in your birth chart, that sign is a descriptor of the experiences that defined the environment you were born into. So to have mutable signs is to have had to focus on the task of trust. And each of the four mutable signs are offering us an understanding of trust. Each of the four mutable signs is using a different tool to reach that goal of trust, which is, how do I know what I know? How do I know what I know is true? Of the four mutable signs, we have Sagittarius, which is fire, and it's using the will and entitlement. Sagittarius is the pattern maker. Its ideal is to be believed, right? And so with Sagittarius, we are bringing our existing understandings, things that we have been taught, and what our experiences have reinforced to us. There's a strong sense of convincing and conviction with Sagittarius. And so when you encounter an experience, you encounter a person, with the mutable signs, we're really talking about encountering contradictions. When you come to a point where you're getting mixed signals, where you don't know which faculty to rely on, which faculty do you automatically fall back on? So if you have Sagittarius, it is the need to be believed. It is the entitlement to impose your perception, your interpretation onto whatever it's happening, whether that's your own behavior, somebody else's words, right? When you have this existing belief system, Sagittarius says, I'm going to interpret this through the lens of what I know and believe to be true, right? This can cause some problems because what if you know and believe to be true is contradicting someone else's intentions or even the impact? It's this way that Sagittarius allows us to protect ourselves from being influenced by someone else's beliefs, but it can also make it such that we often feel misunderstood and misinterpreted because the meaning that we're assigning to our own actions can be in misalignment with the intentions, or rather, it can be in misalignment with the impact that it's having on other people. Then we have Virgo. Virgo as a mutable sign is the ideal is to be able to trust that people and things are what they appear to be. I'm going to say that again. The sidereal Virgo ideal is to be able to trust that people and things are what they appear to be. Being able to accept someone or something at face value. Being able to accept that if it looks like a duck, it's actually a duck and it's not, a wolf in a duck's costume, so to speak. So Virgo says, in order to reach this goal of trust, I'm taking things at face value. I'm keeping receipts as evidence that what I saw and what I heard, what actually happened, that what something appears to be is what it actually is. Then we get to the part of the sky that's occupied right now at this new moon in sidereal Pisces. And that is, of course, sidereal Pisces, where the sun, the moon, Saturn, and Venus all will be at this new moon. This is building up a stellium, which will be the defining feature of the sky through the end of April. When we're talking about Pisces, we're talking about the ideal that says to be able to trust that what I feel is true. Can you see how Pisces and Virgo as opposing signs have ideals that are at odds with each other? Virgo to be able to trust that people and things are what they appear to be. And Pisces says to be able to trust that what I feel is true. What happens when what you feel and what something appears to be are in contradiction to each other? Pisces as the stellium that we're in now, that we've been kind of flirting with since mid-January. Literally everything that's been happening in the sky, and that also means everything that's been happening in your life since January has really been leading up to this moment that we are in right now. Everything astrologically going all the way back to the full moon in sidereal Gemini, going all the way back to the stellium in sidereal Cancer. I'm sorry, the stellium in sidereal Capricorn. You can go back a few episodes, probably to episode 15, 14, 16 maybe, to get caught up. I'll drop the links in the description so you can have the right episode to refer to. But everything that has been happening astrologically has been building up to this moment. Everything that we have been experiencing in our personal lives, the changes, the transitions, and the shifts that have occurred in our personal lives since January. And of course, collectively, everything that we've witnessed and we've experienced and been party to since January of 2026 is now reaching this fever pitch. It's reaching this tipping point. This whole time, we have been inching closer and closer to suspicion. Suspicion is how Pisces protects itself from being lied to. Suspicion is how Pisces protects itself from when there is information being withheld. Suspicion is how Pisces protects itself from other people's ignorance. Suspicion says, I'm getting mixed signals. I've encountered a contradiction. And my gut and my feelings and my emotions and my body are telling me that I cannot trust that people and things are what they appear to be. So you can apply this personally and collectively. What is the collective sentiment that we are in right now? It's skepticism. It's suspicion. Do we believe what the United States government has to say about its own intentions? Do we believe the United States government and what it has to say about its own motivations and its actions and its plans? And if we don't believe it, why don't we believe it? Because going all the way back to October of 2023, when the violence against is not real began in earnest against Gaza. We can really go all the way back then because that was during eclipses in Pisces and Virgo. That's when that series began. And I talk about this in the monthly Div for Lib meetup. I always drop the link to register to that in the description. It's usually at the end, but I think I moved it up. So if you haven't been coming to the Div for Lib Astro meetup and getting to engage in community and getting to engage with me personally and ask questions about the collective astrology as well as your own birth chart and how you're learning the Divination for Liberation system, you should come. It's every second Wednesday of the month, 6 p.m. Central on Zoom. Again, that link is in the description. But I always start off the meetups with a timeline of the year. And in this timeline, I'll probably put a little screenshot on the screen. In this timeline, I have a column for each month and a row for each sign. And the colored bars across this timeline are marking when there is astrological activity in each sign. Astrological activity in a sign always connects to what was happening last time there was astrological activity in the sign. So, what is happening right now in March of 2026 is definitely going to connect to what was happening in March of 2025. That's when Saturn first entered Pisces. That's when we were wrapping up the eclipses in sidereal Pisces and Virgo. And that's when we had a massive stellium in Pisces. And we had Venus retrograde in Pisces. So we're circling back to that time. And you could ask yourself, how were you working on self-trust? How were you, what was going on at that time that maybe even then is allowing you to plant seeds of self-trust now? I want you to really be thinking about this astrology in terms of the emotion of suspicion and the experience of meeting a contradiction. We're at a really important point. A lot of this astrology, the mutable, and I'm going to get to Gemini in a minute because that's where Jupiter is. Jupiter's the big boss right now. But a lot of what we're dealing with is the way that large language models, these large data sets, and AI have rapidly disrupted existing hierarchies of trust. Hierarchies of trust that are external, inside institutions, and institutions in relation to each other. AI has disrupted hierarchies of trust internally, in that many of us, have been seduced into handing over our capacity to form judgments to a computer or a machine. And more specifically, we have been seduced in handing over our capacity to form judgments to the judgment of whoever's bias is encapsulated in these large language models and machines. So much of AI and the way it's sold to us is rooted in this myth of objectivity, as if AI has access to some type of decision-making realm where emotions are irrelevant, where race is non-existent, where capitalism is not a factor, where misogyny and transphobia and homophobia are not factors. But in fact, a large language model is a data set that has compiled the biases of an entire culture. How much of your skepticism has been directed internally at your own capacity to sift through information and discern the truth? How much of your skepticism has been turned internally to make you distrust your own capacity to discern who in your life is worthy of your trust? Let's talk about Jupiter and Gemini, because when we have a stellium in Pisces, Jupiter is going to be the planet that dominates the sky. Jupiter is pattern recognition. Jupiter's job is to help us form judgments with as little information as possible. We are able to extrapolate from one instance, one word, one sentence, one body language, one conversation, one experience. We're able to extrapolate that something about the whole, something about what the bigger picture is. I can give you just a little clue. And from that little clue, Jupiter says you are able to discern the whole from the part. Jupiter says, especially in Gemini, how much information do you need before you can trust that what you know is true? How many instances of a thing do you need to experience before you recognize the pattern? Now, there are some people who are too quick to form judgments. They're too quick to assume that something is connected to a larger pattern. And for those folks, Jupiter and Gemini is an opportunity to change your belief system. It's an opportunity to check and bear witness to your reflex to assume. And as you invite and are open to new information and experiences, it can change what you've assumed the pattern to always be. On the flip side, there are some people who are too open to the judgments and opinions of other people. There are some people for whom there is no threshold of knowledge or information will make them feel secure and certain. And so for you, you've got to situate yourself in this moment and find yourself and say, where have I been letting in too many opinions of other people? Where have I been too open to influence from other people? This is something that I've talked a lot about with my clients who have Gemini. And this is with an asterisk because we always have to take the whole chart into consideration. There's never really something true for everyone who has a sign occupied all the time. This is where the internet will really have you messed up because there's a lot of generalizations. And because of these generalizations, it's very hard for you to discern who's telling you the truth about astrology. And it's also hard for you to know when something is accurate or not, because there really are so many factors to take into consideration. When I say Gemini, I'm not saying everybody. Come get your chart read if you're not sure, right? So, something that I've talked a lot about with my clients, specifically who have Gemini sun, is how their baseline is to distrust their own perceptions and how their baseline is to leave themselves open to being seen by other people and allowing the way that other people see them to influence the way that they see themselves. This baseline of like, I don't know myself, or I can't trust that I am showing up in the way that I perceive myself to be showing up. And for these folks, I don't say to them that you shouldn't listen to anyone. It's really about discernment. What proof has someone given to you that their perception and judgment is worthy to be taken into consideration as you form your sense of self-worth and as you seek validation out in the world? Who has proven themselves to have discernment on their own part Who has shown you curiosity in a way that makes you fall back on your own understanding and to question your own perceptions, not to make room for somebody else's opinion of you, but for you to even question where your perceptions are coming from. Are they rooted in your lived experience, or they internalized messages and indoctrination from outside of you? This is a really important question that I think that we can ask ourselves collectively, particularly in America, right? How do we know that we are who we say we are? How do we know that we can trust what we are told about who we are? Gemini's ideal is to be able to trust that what I know is true. But Gemini's challenge is that they never really trust that what they know is true. And so they go and get more and more and more and more and more information. They'll Google, they'll take a poll of all their friends. They'll ask ChatGPT. None of those things are inherently wrong, but you have to remember mutable signs are seeking certainty in a certain way. They want to know for sure. Virgo wants to know for sure that people and things are what they appear to be. Sagittarius wants to know for sure that you believe them. Pisces wants to know for sure that they can trust that what they feel is real. And of course, Gemini wants to be able to trust that what they know is true. So each of these four mutable signs is offering us a way to get to truth. Over reliance on one of these faculties or means of knowings always spells trouble. And that's really where we find ourselves in society right now. We have over relied on words, we have over relied on external forms of knowledge, and we have atrophied our inner knowing. Pisces is here to rectify that. Where in your life is your inner knowing atrophied? Inner knowing looks like being able to hold on to yourself and the truths that are emerging inside of you when there is no external evidence to validate, when nobody else can see it, when nobody else even knows it. Pisces tells us that there is some knowledge that is uniquely subjective, and that unique subjectivity does not disqualify it from being truth. As always, discernment is necessary because even if you lean too far on your inner knowing, it makes you overly suspicious and paranoid when there is no bar of enough evidence that's going to make you believe something other than what it is that your intuition or gut is telling you. This is a really difficult moment that we're in because I think what we're individually and collectively confronting is a kind of spiritual bankruptcy. Our religions have distanced themselves so much from what Carl Jung would call the numinous, that subjective encounter with the mystical and the divine, upon which all religions are founded. Mary saw Jesus at the tomb with the holes in his hands. That was a numinous experience upon which an entire religion was founded. Everyone wanted to have the experience of the encounter with the crucified Savior. Everyone wants to reach nirvana, right? Depending on what your religious tradition is, there's a numinous experience that is foundational to the doctrine. And the rituals created around that religious experience are meant in some ways to reproduce that numinous experience. I grew up in the Pentecostal church. And so much of my religious upbringing was how do we reproduce this numinous experience of this encounter with the Holy Ghost, like they did on the day of Pentecost? Whether it is tearing for the Holy Ghost after you're baptized, whether it's in service and the kind of conjure that brings about that encounter with the Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit through gospel music, through preaching, through exhortation, through the recitation of scripture, through prayer, through meditation, right? Everyone was looking for that encounter. They wanted to have a personal encounter. But I think that our religions, Christianity included, have been consumed by the larger religions that we don't call religion in this society. And those religions are the religion of whiteness, the religion of capitalism, and the religion of imperialism and patriarchy. We are spiritually starved. We have been severed from our bodies. We have been severed from our inner knowing. We have been coerced into believing that the only means of knowing anything is when a teacher tells you, a religious authority tells you, or interprets for you, the news media tells you, and now Chat GPT tells you. I really think so much of consumers' willingness to be seduced by tech bros into embracing AI is because they are genuinely looking for a numinous encounter. They are genuinely looking for a spiritual experience. They are seeking to reclaim something mystical that has been stolen from us. And they look to these chat bots and Claude and Chat GPT and so on and so forth because it seems magical to them. Even if they know it's a data center somewhere, it seems mad. How could this chat bot, how could this AI know me? There is a longing for the mystical that is being taken advantage of by tech bros. And you can hear it in the way that they speak about AI. They speak about they want to make it this most intelligent entity. And if they could just get more data and build more data centers, we can have this super intelligent computer that somehow is smarter than any human that has ever existed. That if we just pour all of the knowledge that humans have ever compiled or thought into this machine, it'll be some type of super intellectual, intelligent deity. And people have bought into it. Because who is your God? Where is your God? Your God isn't a computer now. It's the thing whose judgment most won't question. They'll ask ChatGPT a question and accept it without any skepticism or suspicion. This is more common than you think. I know my listeners tend to be much more having a healthy relationship with suspicion. But AI psychosis, there's a name for it because it keeps happening. People keep losing touch with reality because these AI chatbots are not super intelligent. They're mimicking mirrors that just repeat back to people what it is that it is programmed to assume people want to hear. When we get to April in the 2026 Sidereal Astrology Guide, and again, you got to come to the monthly study group. It'll be on the second Wednesday of the month on Zoom. But when we get to April, there's some questions in here about developing spiritual practices in the 2026 Sidereal Astrology Guide. And I want to offer that to you now. Capitalism keeps us trapped in this prison of materiality because it eats up our time and consumes our mental space in a way that we literally don't have time for reflection. We don't have time for meditation. Where can we go that there is enough silence to hear our inner voice? Not the one that's repeating the tape that's been narrated to us our whole lives, but the inner voice that questions, the inner voice that connects dots and makes connections. One thing that AI will never do is create. AI doesn't have that innate, inborn life force that is constantly drawing upon the context of its lived experience. AI don't have lived experience. There's no context for AI. AI is contextless. It doesn't have a mother. It doesn't have a father. It didn't grow up in a neighborhood or a community. It hasn't been loved. It hasn't been rejected. It hasn't been traumatized. It hasn't learned something new that it never knew before. It's never experienced beauty. It's never experienced disgust. It's never had a spontaneous emotional reaction to an unpredictable stimuli. It's never looked another person in the eye and felt that feeling of sometimes discomfort because you feel like you're being seen through, but also the magnetism of wanting to merge and come closer. Those are all context for you. Those are all context that AI can never know, can never experience. And so I want to wrap up this section to really talk about where is the mystical and the spiritual in your life? What does divine even mean to you? What is it that you accept without question, without skepticism or suspicion, to the point that it has become your implied religion? Have you accepted capitalism without question, making it your implied religion? The thing that you measure everything in your life against? What about whiteness? Do you question whiteness? And this is specifically for white people because I know everybody else questions it. Asterisk, right, for the most part. But do you question whiteness, or has that become your implied religion? Something that you take as it's given to you, that you don't consider what your internal subjective feelings and lived experiences are telling you about who you are? Is patriarchy your religion? What is it that you've accepted without question, and where is there room for suspicion here? We are planting seeds of self-trust at this new moon in sidereal Pisces. And self-trust doesn't mean that you always know right and that I always have to believe myself, or you have to believe yourself all the time. Planting seeds of self-trust is about building an intimate relationship with discernment. It's the willingness to say that you don't know. It's the discernment that allows you to not immediately fill that I don't know space with somebody else's knowing. Planting seeds of self-trust is to be comfortable with the empty space that isn't immediately filled with the indoctrinations of capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy. When someone questions something that has been your normal, before you answer, before you defend, before you resist, before you rebut, you let that empty space of maybe I don't know. Maybe there's something new to be revealed to me. To me, that's spiritual and that's mystical. To be in the space of I don't know and to not immediately fill it up, I think that's where our mystical encounters happen. It doesn't seem woo-woo and magical, but it really is. Because so much of our indoctrination is to defend us against the space of I don't know. Because when the space of I don't know comes in, capitalism can't compete with that. White supremacy can't compete with I don't know, because white supremacy knows everything. It has the answer. If you are not white, you don't deserve to live. And even if you do live, it's going to be whack. Because everything and everyone is inferior to whiteness, even the land, even the earth. Capitalism is not comfortable with I don't know. Because you're wasting time. You got to go to work. There's money to be made. There's bills to be paid. Your checking account is running low. I don't know is death in capitalism. You better know. I think that I am approaching and kind of circling around the a possible role or function of the mystical and the spiritual when it comes to revolution. Because I think so many people fear questioning capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy because they don't want to be in the space of I don't know. If you criticize capitalism, you better immediately have a solution. Well, what are we we gonna do? Then what's the solution? If you criticize the Democrats, you better have who we gonna vote for? How afraid are you of the space of I don't know that you haven't even sat in silence long enough to let the knowing fill the space for you? Let's pull some cards. Real quickly, I'm back with these tarot cards and we about to pull some cards. But I dropped some discount codes for getting a reading with me, and Mercury retrograde straight up ruined it. So in the description of this video, I'm going to drop some new codes, or in the description of this audio if you're listening on a podcast streaming. I'm going to drop some new codes that will be active through the rest of March. So you will be able to get a discount on services with me through the end of March. I don't know what was going on. Mercury retrograde has been really hating on me in every way, but we going to try again, and I'm going to drop some new codes. So I'm so sorry because I know a lot of people emailed me and messaged me saying they were trying to use the codes and they didn't work. I was on customer service with my booking platform, and I thought they had fixed it, but clearly they hadn't, because people were still messaging me after the fact saying that they could not use the codes. So we gonna try again. Dust yourself off and try again. Okay, let's see what these cards have to say. We're planting seeds of self-trust. We're starting off with the Chariot. Sometimes when I'm doing divination, reading for clients, pulling cards, I just get like full sentences and or phrases. And in this case, I got a phrase that talked about completing the work that is begun. The Chariot gives me these vibes of being midstream, and the distance is the same whether you go back or you go forward. Except for if you go back, you still got to cross again. So it's better to just go forward. And so Chariot is a card of marshaling our forces and really contending with the inner resistance that, for whatever reason, is feeling unable to complete what has been started. This work of self-trust, this work of changing our belief systems, this work of reorganizing our collective hierarchies of trust, meaning, do we trust news media? Do we trust the people we see on social media? Which news organization do we trust? Which social media personality do we trust? Can we trust doctors? Can we trust politicians? Can we trust teachers? Which teacher can we trust? Part of the social contract has been teachers are trustworthy, the news is trustworthy, politicians, sometimes trustworthy, but 2023, October, that first eclipse in sidereal Pisces and Virgo, it started a new thing where we really had to contend with the disruption, and I think even the destruction of our existing hierarchies of trust. That the institutions and the hierarchies that had been established both inside them and between them could no longer be accepted as truth wholesale. That the best thing that we could do for ourselves is develop a healthy relationship with skepticism. A healthy relationship that's with skepticism that does not lean into paranoia and blanket distrust of anyone or anything, including ourselves, but stands in the tension of uncertainty that doesn't rush to fill in the blank. This Chariot card is saying that we are midstream. You are midstream in this work of developing self-trust. And one thing that I want to say that's occurring to me, particularly with this Chariot card as it relates to Pisces, you can have a feeling that is an accurate reflection of how you are experiencing a person or a moment, and you can respond to that feeling. You can treat it as truth. But there's also room to withhold judgment. Having a feeling is not a judgment. For example, if a white woman grabs her purse as you walk past her, she is experiencing fear. Does that mean you are fearsome? Does that mean you are someone to be afraid of? Pisces really struggles with this. And collectively, we struggle with this. Can you honor? And this feels so Chariot to me because the Chariot is just this tension where these inner emotional dynamics are competing with each other. Can you honor the truth of what you're feeling without necessarily making that feeling a judgment about what you're experiencing? I just feel like that is just so important because, particularly collectively, conflating emotional experiences or feelings with judgments is one of the primary ways that we are manipulated by nefarious forces like capitalism, white supremacy, and patriarchy. The whole media is shaped to make you afraid, and it presents these images and these stories and these narratives to engender fear in you. And the first thing you do is look for a target for your fear. Who should I be? Who will I project this fear onto? Who's causing this fear? When in fact, the fear was manufactured in the first place. Or even in your own lives, our nervous systems are wired and programmed to default to certain emotional pathways. But those emotional pathways don't have to be judgments about what we're encountering. And as a matter of fact, I think that when we talk about healing, healing is developing the capacity to build space between emotion and judgment, to be able to honor the feeling and to withhold judgment. Let's see what the rest of these cards say. We've got the Empress and we've got the Knight of Cups. The Chariot card for me is speaking to me in this moment about pattern recognition and how recognizing a pattern and interpreting the pattern are two different things. The Empress card for me is often a much needed permission slip to focus on your own feelings and focus on your own needs. Because a lot of times when we have these feelings, like the fear I talked about before that's been engendered by news media narratives and politicians with nefarious intentions, we look for something to project that fear onto. You you're scary, you're mean, you're violent. It's just like, but the Empress for me is this card that says, focus on yourself, focus on your own feelings. I think there's also in this conversation about judging, there's room for not judging your own feelings. Again, there's a distinction between having a sensation or emotion you don't like and judging it, saying it's good or bad, judging yourself for having it, or projecting it on someone else, like I talked about before. The Empress is, I think, speaking to how, over the course of this lunar cycle, the water will be building up in its intensity. And water for me is the body and bodily functions, it's the feelings. The more water in someone's birth chart, or the more water in the sky, the more water signs occupied, the more emotionally reactive we tend to be, but also the more emotionally responsive we have the capacity to be. Emotional reactivity is an unpremeditated behavior in response to a stimuli. But emotional responsiveness has the added element of intention and awareness. I'm doing this on purpose. Sometimes you need some emotional reactivity. If a snake crawled under my door, best believe I'm gonna react. And some of us are disconnected from that reactivity. And maybe this is an opportunity for you to reconnect with that reactivity. That when something hurts, you reconnect with that impulse to turn away and turn towards yourself. It doesn't mean you got to sever. It doesn't mean you got to fight. It doesn't mean you have to cut the person off. It doesn't have to mean you have to pull all of these judgments, but the reactivity is there and it's important. To be emotionally reactive means that for good, you narrow that space between the pain and turning away from that pain, or you narrow that space between the joy and the turning towards that joy. And responsiveness, again, I'm all about the nuance. I'm all about the both and. And so the responsiveness can be too much space and time between something emotionally affecting you and you actually doing something about it. But in the positive sense, that responsiveness is attentiveness and intention. And I think the Empress is talking about both of those. It's talking about responsiveness and reactivity. Then we have the Knight of Cups here. And I think it's important to point out that this is the Knight of Cups and not the Knight of Swords. The Knight of Swords needs to be right. The Knight of Swords is reactive in terms of gotcha, right? Um, needing to prove and convince with the Knight of Swords. But that's not what we have here. We have the Knight of Cups. And this is a card that almost always for me has been permission to do the thing that feels good. But it's within the context of developing this discernment between emotional reactivity and responsiveness towards ourselves. The Knight of Cups is a card for me. Knights are often led by something. The Knight of Cups is led by their feelings. And I think that, particularly in a very misogynistic and patriarchal society, we are indoctrinated with these binaries that say women are weaker and inferior because they're emotional. But I don't know if you saw, there was this video on Threads of this woman who was like filming herself eating a cookie. And I hope it wasn't AI. I don't think it was. But she was filming herself eating a cookie. And before she could get that cookie into her mouth, she paused because she smelled plastic. And she put her phone, no, she went and looked for the culprit, and the lighting fixture was on fire. And she very calmly put down her phone, cookie still in hand, found the fire extinguisher, unlocked it, and put out the fire. And as she walked back to her camera, she put that cookie back into her mouth. She finished eating her cookie. And the Sheila Marie commented, "This is an example of women in leadership positions." Because a man could never, no tea, no shade. Okay, but a man could never. He could never. I mean, anyways, I say all of that to say that so much of how we're indoctrinated says that women are weak because they are emotional. Now, again, I know that my listeners are very smart, and we know that that is not true. That for someone to say they are not emotional is actually to say that they are repressed. And that which is repressed eventually comes to the surface, often in unpredictable and perverse ways. So it's better to feel now than to be overtaken later. And I be feeling bad for men. Like, I'm not even going to hold you, and not even in a pity kind of way, but because every social force in this society conspires to handicap men emotionally. And kudos to the men who manage to reclaim emotional agency, because you're doing it against all odds. But this is a moment for all of us to reclaim emotional agency, and for all of us to develop a more nuanced and discerned relationship with emotional reactivity and responsiveness. And you know why? If you've been here, if you were OG, if you don't listen to enough episodes over the past year, then you already know that revolution begins in the body, and there will be no change. Capitalism gonna be right here until you learn how to feel. Patriarchy gonna be right here until you get in your body. And white supremacy absolutely is not going anywhere until you come home to your body and your feelings. And you not see your emotions as your enemy, but your emotions as your compass. One that sometimes needs to be recalibrated because it be getting a little off. But the one that's giving you the most readily accessible truth about how what you're experiencing in this world is impacting you and affecting you. And the whole saying, for those who don't know, revolution begins in the body. Freedom begins in the imagination. And liberation is what happens when we revolt and we get free together. Liberation is at the intersection of embodiment and imagination. You can't separate the two. You got to have both. And with that, we're going to call it a wrap. Thank you for tuning in to the Divination for Liberation podcast. I am your host and diviner, Dana Lynn Knuckles, also known as the People's Oracle. I'll catch you back in 2 weeks, God willing, and the creek don't rise, because creeks be rising, especially down here in New Orleans. If you know, you know. But I'll be back in 2 weeks with a reading for the full moon in sidereal Virgo. There will be even more Pisces in the sky, and I bet your suspicion gonna be extra heightened. And I want to know what you're doing with it. Thank you to all of the people who have been leaving me reviews on Apple Podcast and all of the lovely comments on Spotify. I be reading the comments on YouTube. Oh my gosh. I love y'all so much for engaging on social platforms. One, because it be teaching these little robotic algorithms that people actually want to see my content. But also, I love to know who's listening. I love to know who's watching. I love to read your insights and your revelations. And I love to know how the divination is hitting you. How is it hitting you? As always, we have a little COVID update. As always, I dropped the link to the latest wastewater report. in the description of this video or this podcast. So you don't have to take my word for it, that you can actually see some data, because discernment, right? Diversity of trustworthy sources. I got my trustworthy sources along with my divination. And Mars is going to go into Pisces at the beginning of April. And I think for me, that will possibly mean a minor surge of COVID cases on the West Coast and the Southwest, um, and maybe even the South and Southeast. The Midwest and the Northeast, there still are some hot spots. Make sure you check the wastewater for your locale, because we are not in sync. There are some places where COVID is circulating more heavily, as being shown by the wastewater. And then there are some places where it's barely circulating at all. Like in California right now, it's barely circulating and levels are relatively low. Overall, when you look at the wastewater report that I'm going to leave a link to in the description of this podcast, you're going to see that the only time that wastewater levels for the nation were lower than this was during the first year of the pandemic, when everybody was staying at home. So this is a really promising moment for me. I still think that we have at least one more surge this year, which will be in April. And I think we might be in the relative clear. And by clear, I don't mean COVID disappears. I mean that circulating COVID nationally reaches the lowest levels that we've seen in a long time. For those who've been following me in my predictions, I've been looking forward to 2026 and 2027 for a while. I don't really have any flu updates. I need to see what's going on. But as far as the astrology is concerned, I'm still giving us through 2027 for caution around a flu epidemic or pandemic. We had a really rough flu over the past several months that has pretty much receded, but I'm still on guard. Bird flu is still circulating amongst poultry, flocks, and wild birds, and that's just dangerous. Though I have seen some promising clinical evidence or um, data in terms of why we haven't seen an H5N1 pandemic, even though we've been in danger for a while. And some of that just has to do with cross neutralizing from previous strains of flu that people have been infected with. And there was one study I saw that was talking about why farm workers weren't spreading it to each other or bringing it home. Maybe I'll find that and link that in the description as well for those of you who are interested. In the meantime, in between time, take care of yourselves, take care of yourselves. Really meter your diet with the media. There's a lot of fear mongering going on, and it's very, very hard to know who to trust. Um, there's just a lot of uncertainty and a lot of lies and a lot of propaganda. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. But as I talked about in this video, making room for silence, I think, is such a necessary way to access truth in this moment, or at the very least, to be able to access the discernment necessary to figure out which sources are trustworthy. I will see you soon. Bye.